Habitualis the chess noob, learning and having fun playing chess. Today is a rainy morning on a Sunday in Sydney, and I usually play a couple of games in the morning with my morning coffee. I often play until I win. The first game I played, I was unfortunately lost. I was in a winning position, but got flagged, just ran out of time. And, maybe it's a moral victory, but a loss is still a loss. The second game, which is the game I'm going to talk about now, the lesson from this game is to never give up, never surrender. You never should underestimate your opponent's ability to blunder and give you a victory, which was kind of what happened in this game. So let's go to have a look. Review first. As you can see, losing position most of the game, and then bang, a blunder allows me victory. Fairly long game, I think 52 moves before the opponent resigned. Probably fairly similar levels of accuracy. We had our share of blunders, share of good moves. Let's go straight to analysis. Rightio. So I played white and I'm an e4 player. So e4, e5. I went for the Vienna, so knight to c3. And the opponent immediately played the Shuralev counter gambit, which is bishop to b4, immediately attacking the c3 knight. Now I've played this a few times, and usually when this happens, you end up with just some weird games, weird positions, interesting chess, I suppose. I developed my bishop to c4, and the opponent immediately captured the knight. And I suppose that is the whole point of the counter gambit. There's no point bringing the bishop there if you weren't going to attack. Capture back with the b pawn, potentially opening up the b file. They move the queen out there. Again, unexpected move by the opponent. Here I thought for a while, and I decided that I would bring out my queen as well, inviting a trade, and if that was the case, I would be quite happy. We'll have a queenless game, but it would allow me to gain an advantage in development. Now, I suspect that perhaps the opponent was thinking of the same thing, so they just developed their d pawn. I did the same, sort of launching an attack on that pawn here. Given that, with my doubled pawns, that gave me an opportunity to undouble them. The opponent developed their bishop to e6. I thought that probably wasn't a good move, and I thought I was fairly clever with the further push of the d pawn. It's interesting to me that Stockfish didn't like it, preferring just a retreat of the bishop. They retreated their bishop back to d7. And here I decided to move rook b1, attacking the pawn there, given the opponent has moved their bishop, and allows me to make use of this open file. That's a good move. At this point, I wasn't really sure. I thought given that I'd already moved my my rook, I would continue to potentially attack on the queen side. I thought this was okay. Again, Stockfish hates it, which I suppose makes sense. I thought maybe if that would invite sort of advance of that pawn, I would capture back. Maybe there'll be some sort of attack or play here, but Stockfish didn't like it, which I suppose it's okay. Developed the knight to e7. Here I thought, might as well just capture. I think at this point I realized it probably wasn't that good a position. The opponent could capture back. If I did some, if I sort of basically just looked just a bit stuck there, basically. So I decided to capture, which seemed like it improved my position somewhat. Computer, however, suggested just retreating that bishop back to d3. Captures. Here, I realized that probably wasn't a good move. I thought about developing the knight to e2 to allow for castles. And of course, my thinking here was potentially developing the bishop to g5 with an attack on the queen, but I suppose it's just so obvious, and the opponent could just defend that square with pawn to h6, and then the knight's just not in a very intelligent looking position here. Nonetheless, that's what I did, and automatically regretted it, I suppose. And of course, the problem here is I was thinking I probably should have just taken the queen here. I sort of tossed that up because the problem is if the queen takes me, I weaken the structure of the pawns on this side. And that's what eventuated, kicked myself afterwards. Forced to capture, obviously back with the G pawn, and now of course I've got sort of doubled pawns on both the G file and the C file, and even though there's some material equality, quite a bit down on the evaluation. Opponent sort of advances and sort of attacks on the king side, which seemed to make sense. I've sort of wondered here what I should be doing. Decide to just move my bishop here and to e3. Computer reckons sort of retreating the knight, I suppose, to sort of rotate it out of that sort of weird sort of unhelpful sort of position here. I suppose that makes sense. At this point, I thought better get my king out of the way. Obviously, I can't castle this side with the rook already moved. Doesn't make sense to castle this side given that the whole G file is open. So I thought I'll move the king up, move it out of the way. Computer thought it was okay. I don't know. The evaluation seems to get worse and worse. A4, yeah, okay. Yeah, I suppose take up some space. Now, I thought that the opponent probably made a mistake here with short castles, given that the opponent's already weakened the defense of the king on that side. The G file is open, which sort of gives me a potential line of attack. So I thought, oh, that sort of gives me some opportunities, and the evaluation did go down for the opponent there. I decided here to get rid of that sort of troublesome knight, sort of in the middle of nowhere, doing nothing. I was happy to potentially sort of get to sort of trade that knight. So the opponent here would obviously capture with the pawn to weaken the defense of that king further. And I've already have a rook potentially on the H file. Could very easily move the other rook here to the G file. And I thought maybe I had a serious attack here, and the bishop here already is attacking on the king side. So that was my logic, to basically gambit the knight to get rid of a defender, in this case the pawn. So captures back. I know that Stockfish thinks this is an absolutely bad idea. And as it turns out, I probably just didn't have enough attackers on that side. Retreat the bishop, and one of the things you'll see here is in sort of the game as it moves forward, I move this bishop so along this diagonal quite a few times. The opponent advances their knight. Here I moved my other rook to the G file. Oh, thank you. They think that was good. Okay, that was best, was it? Yeah, I thought about that, I suppose. They move the king out of the way. Here I'd move the bishop to attack their rook. And as I said, that I move that diagonal quite a bit in this game. And here I thought I had an opportunity to infiltrate with the rook. And very pleased to see that Stockfish thought that was actually a pretty good move as well. The opponent finds probably the only great move. I suppose the only move that makes sense, that protects that knight. Shuffled my bishop back, given that was under attack by their rook. Yep, okay, so I suppose just a waiting move, and it sort of develops their pawn as well. Here I decide to double up, form a battery. The opponent moves their knight here, and I think perhaps what they saw, which does make sense. One of the thoughts that I had here was that maybe I could go here, and they would sort of capture. And I thought, is it possible they wouldn't see a sort of a block with their knight, and if they move the king out of the way, that would allow me to capture the other rook. I don't know. Some of these fantasies sometimes really just don't work out, because if they're obvious to me, they're probably obvious to the opponent, and there's no reason why they should oblige me such a damaging line for them. So they move their knight here. Yep, blunder. I thought, look, let's just trade a rook. I know, and retrospective, that's clearly a terrible idea. Given they're a whole piece up, I shouldn't be in the business of getting rid of my own pieces. And of course, one of the things here is that that pawn is just unguarded. It's a free pawn, and that pawn defends these two other pawns here. So I really missed an opportunity there. Didn't capitalize on it. Anyway, captures, not doing well. Now I'm left with just a rook and a bishop compared to a rook with two knights. The opponent really should be winning here. That's a good move by the opponent. I move my rook out of the way with an attack on that knight. They bounced that over there. That was obviously a good move. I had to move my knight out of the way. And I wasn't too sure what the opponent was thinking here. That didn't seem like a good move to me, because it allows me to basically make some of the moves I did before. Here, it renews my attack. Maybe they thought this was a way to open up space for their rook to move, but I was pretty sure that was a bad move. So immediately move back here, and look at that equality. Even though I'm a whole piece down. King makes again the right move, though that was pretty much a very similar move to before, wasn't it? So that was apparently a mistake. Yep, I really should have been pushing that pawn to try to promote. I thought maybe I had an attack on the knight there. And the opponent makes another blunder. Now I am seriously potentially ahead. However, I think I gave up this advantage. Yeah, with that move. All it does, it leads back to equality. What I really should have done was to move the knight, move the rook here, given that this rook now doesn't have any escape squares. From here, it could go here, 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 or potentially here. Here, that's under defense of that pawn, and these two under the defense of the rook, and of course the king guards that square. So pretty much, I could have captured that knight for the cost of a pawn, and that would have very much helped me, to be ahead. Given that in an endgame, I'm probably better off with a rook and a bishop compared to a rook and a knight, especially where one of the rook is trapped in the middle of nowhere. Here, again, maybe I was just fantasizing. Maybe he wouldn't do that. But no, of course they did. That did allow me to move my bishop to create another attack. That was a good move by the opponent. And at this point, I thought, look, maybe this knight really is this knight is pinned, and it requires the defense of this knight. So I could launch a potential attack on that knight. And that's what I did. So I advanced the pawn to h4. Oh, good. Yeah, Stockfish thought it was good too. King out of the way, which is fine. However, that still, allows me to check. Yep, forced back. Now, I suppose we could do some repetition here, but that wouldn't be too useful. Pawn up again. Now with an attack on that pawn. Potentially, I'm happy to trade one of the opponent's pieces for a pawn. That was a good move. So suggest. So here I thought I'd better move the bishop out of the way. Computer suggested making that move. Interesting. The king makes a blunder. Again, I thought that was probably a bad move. Like, this is a complex position. I'm not surprised that the opponent found it difficult to play this position. Effectively, this pins that knight with my rook in that position. I thought I was being clever here, moving the pawn forward, moving towards promotion. I sort of saw that it'd be difficult potentially for the opponent to stop promotion. Obviously, I was wrong, and Stockfish could see a way. Opponent plays that move, I suppose, guarding that square. Here I was a little bit stuck. I wasn't entirely sure what was the next best approach. I decided to attack here, and the logic here was that, the logic here was that I was going to invite the opponent to capture with that pawn, and that would allow me to move that bishop to this position with not that one, with that pawn now basically under attack. So I think that was my logic, to gambit that pawn so that I could push forward. The opponent takes. Okay, so suggested here. That's interesting. I thought this was a good position for me with an attack on that pawn. Opponent makes a good move. And I think at this point I had sort of realized that that pawn was probably dead. That pawn was probably toast. Nonetheless, push forward. There are still opportunities here. The opponent now moves the knight back to f8. Again, sort of an attack on that pawn. Here I capture, and here I thought that there were some possibilities, like maybe I could come out ahead, or at least maybe there was a possibility that we could sort of trade to equality. Yep, the opponent made the right move here, and that's probably why that pawn push before was bad. And here I thought about quite a while. I thought I had probably lost the position. I think the computer thinks that rook takes rook is the best approach, and then of course the opponent would then capture with their knight. But then that means the end game is two knights versus a bishop. I was pretty sure I would lose that game. So eventually what I ended up playing was, well, even though, yes, the computer thinks this is better, the reason I took that was that in this position, I was inviting the opponent to capture my rook, and that would then allow me to capture the knight with an attack on the rook. In the end game, I thought it was probably better for me to have one bishop versus a rook versus one bishop versus two knights. That was what I was thinking, but I thought I was probably lost in this position anyway. But then the opponent surprised me, and this is that critical blunder. I was super surprised here, and I think what was going on was the opponent thought I think the opponent just didn't want to liquidate my pieces. And of course, when you have material advantage, that's what you should do. You should liquidate the opponent's pieces because you have a good chance to win. And here I saw a potential, devastating move by taking that knight. I get rid of the knight. Now, if they then take the rook, then I would take their rook, and then at the I would have be a bishop up in the endgame. Or alternatively, if they decided to, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so and so that's what I did. Pretty much forced to take back, and now I am a bishop up in the end game. And with that sort of a pawn structure, I was pretty sure I was going to win. And basically what I was going to do here was I needed to give a path for one of my pawns. So the opponent tries to push their pawns. It doesn't really matter. They've got 4 pawns here. I've got more pawns here and 4 pawns blocking the appropriate squares. Captures. Yep, that basically just allows me to undouble those pawns. These 2 pawns will never get past. So that pawn will be blocked by this pawn. This pawn will fundamentally be blocked by this pawn. And the king is in the wrong location. I moved my pawn up just to block the advance. That's fine. King to this position, and basically what I'm trying to do is to create a safe path for my f pawn, which is the passed pawn. King tries to block, but they're just not fast enough. They are just not fast enough. So, and the queen is blocked off. So the king cannot go into this square. King cannot go into this square, or this square, or this square. So the king is completely blocked, and which means that this pawn has a unimpeded path to promotion. That doesn't really make any difference. And I start advancing my pawn. Yep, that's the last gasp, I think, for the opponent, and the opponent now resigns. And basically, this pawn is definitely going to promote. There's nothing the opponent can do to stop promotion, and once that occurs, checkmate is impending. And Stockfish says that there's a forced mate in 11. GG. And the moral of the story, never give up, never surrender. Sometimes you're given a gift due to an opponent blunder.